It's beautiful, isn't it? But like so many other things of exquisite beauty, this one is stirring up some major concerns. The waters of the western Atlantic, including the Gulf of Mexico and Caribbean, are witnessing the emergence of an invasive species, Pterois volitans, the lionfish, a bold, voracious predator with a mane of venomous spines capable of rendering a sting fatal to some marine species and excruciatingly painful to humans. They are indigenous to the Indo-Pacific, introduced into these waters either by accident or neglect, or both. The spread of the lionfish here has been downright viral. These piscine pincushions now range from North Carolina to South America. Anecdotal evidence suggests that they had been released into American Atlantic waters as early as the 80s. It is suspected that aquarium owners, tired of lionfish eating everything else in their tanks, did the quote-unquote humane thing by throwing them into the ocean. It is also reported that 6 lionfish escaped into the sea in South Florida when Hurricane Andrew destroyed a shorefront home in 1992. In their native waters, they have been integrated into the food chain for millennia. Fear and misinformation abound as an excitable marine community struggles with the invasion and tries to decide what to do about it. Most often, the decision means a death sentence.
Complimentary drinks will be available during the meal service.
Dear Diary, I just left LAX aboard a 747 with my $6 bottle of water and a copy of the Times. 15 hours from now, we'll arrive in Sydney. I won't have a June 27th. However, I do find it strangely consoling that July 12th will last an extra 15 hours. Don't ask me how that works. I'll be in Sydney for about 2.5 hours, long enough to go through passport control. Then it's a short hop to Brisbane, where I'm to meet up with my old friend and mentor, Stan Waterman, his agent, and my friend, Nancy McGee, and a group of other divers from the U.S., Honduras, and Sweden. The last time Stan and I went diving together was on Bonaire in 1995, and it's high time we did it again. This time, we're on the other side of the world. Our destination, the Solomon Islands. It's early morning in Brisbane. In a few minutes, we'll board this Air Vanuatu flight to Honiara on the island of Guadalcanal. We land at Henderson Field in the shadow of the World War II battleground known as Bloody Ridge. The very name Guadalcanal conjures up memories of some of that war's fiercest battles. In 1942, this was the most important real estate in the Pacific. If the Japanese had been able to sever Allied supply lines here, it would have been a disaster. Guadalcanal's code name was Cactus, and the pilots of what was called the Cactus Air Force were billeted near here in tents with mud floors. They fought malaria and the Japanese and competed with crocodiles and leeches for bathing time in the river nearby.
Prominent in the Coral Triangle of Southeast Asia, the Philippines are home to a brilliant community of marine creatures. Ashore, a colorful, industrious population makes all visitors feel welcome. Underwater is an explosion of sea life in one of the most prolific reef systems on Earth. One of the crown jewels of the triangle is Apo Island, a tiny dot in a hidden corner of the Sulu Sea. About 40 years ago, these reefs were all but gone, casualties of dynamite and cyanide fishing, which killed off almost every living thing in these waters. An experimental marine reserve was created here in the 1970s. Protected areas were established around the island, allowing fish populations to recover and proliferate. This led to larger catches outside of the no-fishing zones and gave rise to a healthy tourist trade. Dive professionals now call these reefs astonishing, and Apo Island is living proof of the success of thoughtful conservation practices. Bringing that message to the other side of planet Earth, on the Lake Michigan shore, is the John G. Shedd Aquarium in Chicago. Inside, its wild reef exhibit was inspired by none other than Apo Island. The exhibit's designer is Brian Schutze.
So it's telling a great story. It's referencing the beauty of not only the people and the culture, but of what's underwater and what's above water, but in particular what's underwater. And it takes you through this almost dream world of reality as you swim through the reefs of the Philippines. You meet the people, you see the animals that live there, and you learn how all of that connected together is why it can be successful.
Exhibit curator George Parsons.
Being a scientist, I did some research and looked it through several books and compiled the species list and had it all pictured in my head. But still, when I jumped in that water, it was just mind blowing. I have a little dive slate that I showed my dive partner while we were diving, and I actually wrote on it, "I could die now." I actually still have the dive slate upstairs in my office.
From dead reef to a reef to die for, Apo Island, living proof that reef conservation can work. Night train to Cairo. A scuba diving and adventure travel show with a twist. Join me, Paul Cater Deaton, as we begin our journey in Cairo, the oldest tourist destination in the world and home to 16 million people. Karnak, the Giza Plateau, Luxor Temple, the Monastery of St. Catherine, sunrise from the summit of Mount Sinai, and the Alabaster Mosque of Muhammad Ali, the Pasha, not the boxer. We travel by boat, camel, horse-drawn carriage, dive boat, hot air balloon, and, yes, the night train to Cairo. So we blast out of Cairo in a blaze of glory. Any minute now. See no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil, and of course, Dr. Evil. Right. All aboard the night train to Cairo.
On the way back down, my young driver takes control of the Bedouin version of a Griffin lighting truck. I walk all the way down, ending up at a vantage point high above the monastery at St. Catherine's. It was built in 527 by Emperor Justinian and was fortified against raiders. For a while during the Middle Ages, these elevated entrances were the only way to get into the place. Noelle and I take a short ride to the compound and stop for some photo ops with our camels and their handlers. We load the cameras with fresh batteries and film and step into history. The
bell tower at St. Catherine's was built in 1871. It contains 9 bells contributed by the Russian Tsar Alexander II. The mosque behind it was built in 1106. Like so many of the historical sites in Egypt, this one reflects contributions made over several centuries. Our friend Ahmad is very well versed in the history of the monastery. He informs us that this is the world's oldest continually inhabited Christian monastery. He takes us to the site of an evergreen said to be of the same stock as the burning bush. Yes, that burning bush. That night, we dine with Bedouin friends at their camp. We hear the music of the oud and the drumming of what we assumed was a doumbek. We discovered that the instrument was, in fact, a gas can, and it looked old enough to have come across with Rommel. I was invited to sit in with the band, and it became one of the most memorable musical experiences of my life.
Good night, Sinai! We love you!
I call this the Sinai Sleep Deprivation Tour. I'm thinking about getting t-shirts made. Meanwhile, back in the present day, something magical happened during a carriage ride through the streets of Luxor. Little children would come running at the sound of the horses' hooves, and throngs of people just went happily about their business as we clip-clop through the streets. This experience underscores the fact that people are just people, and that there is far more love in our world than there is hate. These are the real people of Egypt, and they are glad to welcome their friends from around the world and just say, we make stops at a few mosques and at a Christian church. The good books may be written in different languages, but the fundamental message pretty much remains the same. We finally take some time to chill out over cold drinks at a sidewalk cafe. Some of us try shisha, the traditional Middle Eastern water pipe. This one was filled with an aromatic apple-flavored blend, which even the non-smokers found tasty, if they could manage to puff it without choking. Ancient and modern Egypt collide in Luxor. While one moment finds us watching the passing of a train, the next will deliver us to the side of a water wheel. This is how many ancient Egyptians irrigated their crops. In fact, it's still done this way in many parts of the country. Sun sets on the West Bank, and the beat goes on, in much the same way it has since history was first recorded. We are exhausted and fall asleep to the sounds of the Nile. While we're here on Bonaire's North Shore, we decide to take advantage of acceptable conditions on what is usually the island's wilder side. Lac Cai is a high-voltage dive. Crashing waves and ripping currents often make diving here impossible. The site is fairly well behaved today, and we get to check out some of the reef's more interesting residents, like this green moray. And just before our nitrox supply lets us know that it's time to return to shore, we fall into formation behind a flight of spotted eagle rays.
Back on land after a suitable surface interval, we avail ourselves of the ideal situation with which this trip to Bonaire has presented us. A marriage between biking and diving. Our friend Marcel has agreed to let his motorcycle serve as the workhorse. It's a leftover from the Russian military, and the sidecar lends itself perfectly to the evening's mission. Of course, Bonaire is known the world over for its wealth of shore diving opportunities. Most of the island's dive sites can be accessed from the shore. This one is called the Witch's Hut, named for this little fixer-upper right here. We gear up, stroll across the road, and hit the water. No, we're not swimming through the blacklight poster section at Spencer's, and we're certainly not smoking anything funny. See the coral reef in a whole new light. Cater Deaton's Secrets of the Psychedelic Reef premieres at the Our World Underwater Film Festival. Where can a grouper go for a little detailing work? The coral reef equivalent to a car wash is the cleaning station. This one is under a sunken boat, but they can be found on coral heads and other locations around the reef. It is a place where fish and other marine life can go to have parasites and dead skin removed by smaller creatures which live on such things. Larger fish position their bodies in such a way as to demonstrate that they mean no harm. Then, such small creatures as wrasses, gobies, and shrimp go to work to the mutual benefit of all concerned. This is symbiosis at its most classic. They tidy up inside and out, even swimming into the gills and mouths of their aquatic clientele. The vessel, once known as Patrol Vessel 356, began life in the USSR and was part of the Soviet fleet stationed in Cuba during the Cold War. Her forward guns have sprouted new barrels in the form of sponges, which now give them the look of a comical muzzle blast. The bars blocking an entrance provoke visions of a forgotten gulag. The ultraviolet lights of Wayne Hassan's camera system cast an eerie pall over the ship, while Wayne Brown's lights bathe it in a more appropriate red. And an unsteady slipper lobster shows us that maybe it's discovered a hidden stash of leftover vodka. It was on a dive at bus stop that we first began noticing unusual behavior by some of the groupers. At the very least, some of them will sit and look at their reflections as long as you'll let them. Positioning themselves in the same tails down attitude they exhibit at the cleaning station, they show us that they want to be friends. Just like Snickers, my cat back home, they will just sit there and take it as long as we feel like dishing it out. And, just like Snickers, they outlast me. Every time. I vowed right then and there never to eat one of these again. I just hope that I never make friends with any lobsters. As it's been for thousands of dives over a career spanning 6 decades, there's a camera in his hand. The hand is perhaps not so steady as it once was, the eye not so sharp. But, to paraphrase Yoda, when 90 years old you become, look so good underwater, you will not. Toward the end of the dive, Wayne Hassan, Stan, and I meet at the propeller. Something catches Wayne's eye. A pair of spotted eagle rays passing by in formation, as though they're giving their old friend a final salute. A last hurrah. We make our way back to the line, perhaps for a last look at the undersea world with which he's had a lifelong love affair. And then we surface.